Hello, all you freedom-loving people. Welcome to another episode of Front Page. I'm your host, Scott Cameron Goulet. Elon Musk and Twitter's legal battle has taken a 180-degree turn. So what made the world's richest man, who's not afraid to lose, suddenly compromise? Also making a 180-degree turn is the British Prime Minister with her tax cuts. But Liz Truss still adheres to the Conservative philosophy. There are just some things that cannot be rushed. Inflation in the Eurozone has begun to reach unbearable levels, exceeding 20% in some areas. This may also explain why people in European countries have recently rallied behind conservatives. Iran's crackdown on protesters escalated. Likewise, international opposition to the crackdowns has escalated. Even Canada started sanctions against Iran. Okay, let's get into it. Elon Musk is willing to take Twitter private at the original offer of $54.20 per share. Several media outlets reported on Tuesday Twitter's share soared after the news broke. Bloomberg first reported the move, saying that Musk had made the offer in a letter to Twitter. The news was then reported to several media outlets, including Reuters, the Wall Street Journal, and CNBC financial website. Musk's lawyers communicated the offer to Twitter's lawyers overnight Monday and secretly submitted a letter to the Delaware Court of Chancery ahead of an emergency hearing on the matter scheduled for Tuesday. People familiar with the matter said, if Twitter accepts the offer, the parties will not have to proceed with the 5-day non-jury trial scheduled to begin October 17th. If the parties cannot secure an agreement, the trial will proceed as planned. This is an unexpected twist that could allow both sides to avoid a high-stakes legal battle that is about to begin. CNBC, citing sources, reported that the two sides could reach an agreement as early as Friday. Twitter shares rose 15% at one point after Bloomberg reported the news and were up nearly 13% at $47.93 before trading was halted. It's not yet known why Musk would abandon his legal battle with Twitter and return to his original agreement. After the news was reported on the evening of October 4th, Musk tweeted, "Buying Twitter is an accelerant to creating X, the Everything app." Our Front Page channel reported on Monday that Musk had been in private discussions with Twitter's founder Jack Dorsey about developing a decentralized new platform before he had the idea of buying Twitter. They both support open source transparency and free speech, but Dorsey wants to start with a blank sheet of paper, while Musk prefers a two-pronged approach. So now he has decided to buy Twitter. Maybe he wants to use Twitter so that he can develop the X app. There are currently only 3 single-letter .com domains in the world: Q.com, X.com, and Z.com. Musk owns one of them, X.com, which is the company he first started and later merged to become PayPal. After PayPal was acquired by eBay, Musk made a fortune and invested it all in Tesla and SpaceX. In 2017, Musk bought back the X.com domain name for an unknown amount of money. After preparing to buy Twitter in May of this year, he set up a new company called X Holdings. If the acquisition of Twitter is eventually successful, Twitter is expected to be under this company, including the future X app. Anti-government protests in Iran over the death of Mahsa Amini have entered their 3rd week. The protests began at her funeral and they spread across the country, turning into the worst riots the country has seen in years. Sunday was the first day of classes for first-year students attending Sharif University of Technology. The semi-official Mehr news agency reported that about 200 students gathered at the campus on Sunday afternoon and began chanting slogans including "Woman, Life, Freedom," and "Students prefer death to humiliation." As the demonstration continued, the slogans became more radical and they were directed against the clerical establishment. In the afternoon, security forces arrived on campus. Security personnel fired tear gas and paintballs. In a social media video, some students can be seen fleeing to one of the university's parking lots and later trying to escape the parking lot, where they were chased by security forces on motorcycles. In another video, gunfire can be heard along with the slogan "Death to Khamenei." According to reports, some students were beaten or shot with air guns, and 30 to 40 people were arrested. Protests in Tehran and many other cities have escalated over the past 2 nights despite the rising death toll. The Norway-based Iran Human Rights said on Sunday that at least 133 people have been killed by security forces so far, including 41 protesters. Iranian authorities say that the widespread protests are being instigated by Iran's foreign enemies, namely the United States. The U.S. said it was appalled by the violent crackdown on the protests. Britain echoed those sentiments. The spokesperson for the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Ravina Shamdasani, also expressed concern about the protests in Iran. The Canadian government announced new sanctions against Iranian authorities on Monday, October 3rd. The sanctions target 34 Iranian individuals and entities, including Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and the Morality Police. In a speech in the Kremlin last Friday, Vladimir Putin declared 4 Ukrainian regions as part of Russian territory, and he signed a decree to that effect. In his speech, Putin also made a veiled reference to Russia's nuclear capabilities and the willingness to use nuclear weapons to defend Russian territory, including the 4 newly annexed Ukrainian regions. A few hours later, the U.S. government announced a new round of sanctions against Russia. The new sanctions target the Russian government and military officials and their family members. The U.S. Department of the Treasury, Commerce, and State announced sanctions against policymakers in Moscow, against allies of Russian President Vladimir Putin, and against entities supporting Russian military-industrial companies. The U.S. Treasury Department sanctioned the governor of the Russian Central Bank, who was a former advisor to Vladimir Putin. In addition, the department sanctioned more than 100 members of the Russian Duma. The U.S. Treasury and State Departments have also sanctioned the relatives of members of Russia's National Security Council. The U.S. Department of Commerce is also adding 57 entities to its sanctions list in order to restrict Russia's access to key technologies and other materials in order to restrict Russia in advancing in the war in Ukraine. The 4 regions that were declared by Putin to be Russian together make up 18% of Ukraine's territory. Experts say that these territorial annexations are the largest land grab since World War II. Putin's decision was announced after so-called referendums were held in 4 Ukrainian regions. Putin said that Moscow's decision represents the will of millions of people there. Western countries have generally rejected the results of the referendums and have denounced them as false and manipulated by the Kremlin. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said that the sanctions are a clear warning from the United States and its G7 allies that any person, entity, or country that provides political or economic support to Russia will pay the price for its illegal attempts to change Ukraine's territorial status. The latest Eurostat data shows that the Eurozone inflation rate soared to 10% in September, hitting a new high since records began in 1997. The highest inflation reached was 24.2%. The lowest was 6.2%, and there were 3 countries that exceeded 22%. The 3 countries with the highest inflation rates in the Eurozone are Estonia at 24.2%, Latvia at 22.4%, and Lithuania at 22.5%. The Netherlands ranked 4th with 17.1%, and Germany's inflation rate reached 10%. The lowest inflation rate was in France at 6.2%. The biggest price driver in September was energy, which rose 40.8%. Food prices also rose sharply by 11.8%. Since the inflation rate is so high, the European Central Bank must continue to raise interest rates. However, this may push the European economy into recession. Several authoritative German think tanks have jointly released a forecast. They are forecasting a worrying economic outlook. Torsten Schmidt, the chief economic researcher at Leibniz Institute for Economic Research, said bluntly that the expensive cost of energy is the scourge of Germany and will push Germany into recession. He pointed out that the German economy will shrink in the second half of this year. This harsh reality has caused the European public to turn their support to the Conservatives. The right-wing coalition led by the Brothers of Italy party won last week's Italian general election. They have a majority in both houses of parliament. With the right-wing coalition in power, a major shift in Italy's foreign policy is expected. Giorgia Meloni is 45 years old. She entered politics at the age of 15, right out of high school. In 2008, at the age of 31, she became a youth minister in the Italian government, which is the youngest in the country's history. In 2012, Meloni co-founded a new party, the Brothers of Italy, with two other people, and she became its president 2 years later. Her party went from getting only 2% of the votes in the 2013 election to 4.4% in 2018 and then 26% in 2022. This rising reflects the change of public opinion in Italy. What Meloni represents is actual, authentic, conservative, traditional thinking. She is honoring God's arrangement for human beings, anti-abortion, anti-euthanasia, disapproval of homosexuality, a focus on national identity, and a disapproval of globalism. During the campaign, she repeatedly expressed her hardline stance against the Chinese Communist regime, and she explicitly supported Taiwan. In a meeting with Taiwan's representative in Italy, Meloni said that she would always stand by those who believe in freedom and democratic values. And as for the signing of the Belt and Road Memorandum between Italy and China in 2019, Meloni said that it was a big mistake and that it was made by the Five Star Movement. She indicated that the Belt and Road Memorandum would not be renewed. The signing of the Belt and Road Memorandum came at a heavy political cost to Italy, which is seen by the West as a European weak point in the fight against the CCP. Traditionally, Italy's diplomatic focus has been on partnerships with the European Union, with the United States, and with Mediterranean countries. But since the Five Star Movement and the right-wing coalition formed a coalition government in 2018, Italy has begun to develop a radical pro-China policy. According to The Times, the main driving force behind the move was Michel Geraci, who was then Italy's Deputy Minister of Economic Development. He lived in China for a decade, and he taught at the business school of the University of Nottingham in Ningbo, China. It was Geraci who prompted the Italian government to defect to the CCP. But the situation has now changed. Italy's renewed emphasis on its traditional allies comes with the realization that the promises made by the CCP around 2019 have not been kept. A report by the Torino World Affairs Institute in 2020 concluded that the economic rationale offered by the signing of the Belt and Road Memorandum is optimistic at best, if not outright wrong. The rise of conservatives is not a landscape that is unique to Italy alone. Prime Minister Orban, known as the Trump of Hungary, won this year's election in Hungary. Sweden's Conservative Party won its general election also. In Spain, the right-wing Vox Party, which is allied with Meloni in Italy, is gaining ground. And the British Conservative Liz Truss also took the prime ministership. It's been a month since Liz Truss became Prime Minister, and she recently made a major change to the newly announced tax cuts for high-income earners. The plan has thrown markets into turmoil and threatens to spark a backlash from Conservative MPs. British Chancellor of the Exchequer, Kwasi Kwarteng, said on Monday, October 3rd, that the government's plan to cut taxes for high-income earners has been scrapped. Chancellor of the Exchequer Kwarteng released the government's mini-budget on September 23rd. It is hoped to achieve a good start to a Truss government through a series of budget policies that are believed to promote growth. Economists analyze that to achieve these measures, the government may borrow £120 billion over 3 years. The plan is a big gamble when money is invested in an economy where inflation is still high. The plan caused the pound to plummet. The Bank of England had to intervene and announce bond purchases. Her Conservative Party MPs also warned that her so-called mini budget would not be passed in Parliament. Subsequently, Truss and her Finance Minister Kwarteng backed down. The sharp U-turn sent the pound back to its pre-announcement market value of about 1.12 against the dollar. On October 2nd, before the opening of the Conservative Party's fall conference, Truss admitted that she should have had a better foundation before the government's small budget plan was launched. She said she would stick to the small budget plan, saying she had learned her lesson and will make sure she is better prepared for the future. Since Saturday, October 1st, tens of millions of users in mainland China have not been able to use Google Translate. This is believed to mark a further withdrawal of Google, the U.S. tech giant, from the Chinese market. TechCrunch was the first to report that the Google Translate app had been shut down for China, and users were advised to bookmark the Hong Kong version of the app. However, the Hong Kong version of Google Translate is blocked by the Chinese Communist Party's firewall. This means that Chinese users will not be able to use the translation feature without using a virtual private network. The Translate app is one of Google's only remaining consumer services in China. With the deactivation of the app in China, it marks a further withdrawal of the U.S. tech giant from the world's largest internet market. Google claims that it discontinued Google Translate in China because of low usage. But in fact, Google Translate still has a large user base in China, despite the fact that some Chinese companies offer translation services as well. According to the web analytics platform SimilarWeb, there were 53.5 million visits to the Google Translate website in China in August alone. The discontinuation of the Google Translate app in China reflects the struggle for Western companies to survive in China against the backdrop of increasing content censorship and control by the communist authorities. In January of 2010, Google shut down the Chinese version of its web search function because its failure to bow to increased content censorship by the CCP. Google's withdrawal from China became the most talked about event of the year by Chinese netizens. The Chinese authorities subsequently blocked Google's services on the mainland as well. However, in March of 2017, Google Translate was relaunched in China after a 7-year absence. In late 2018, Google CEO Sundar Pichai admitted that the company was building a version of Google Search for the Chinese market that complied with the CCP's online censorship. The censored version of the search engine, called Dragonfly, was allegedly developed for mainland China in order to block sensitive terms such as human rights, student protests, and democracy, and other sensitive terms. Dragonfly also allows the CCP to track and blacklist users who search for such sensitive terms. The news sparked an immediate backlash. Ultimately, the Dragonfly project was aborted after strong opposition from multiple parties, as well as collective protests and resignations by Google's privacy team against management. And that's a wrap for this episode. Thank you all for your support of Front Page. We've heard from many of our viewers that they don't get notifications of our videos anymore from YouTube, so please follow us on Telegram, Gab, Getter, and on Truth Social for the latest updates. Okay, this is our show for today. Thank you for tuning in. If you like what you heard today, please don't forget to like this video and share it with your friends and family, because everybody deserves to know the truth. Again, thank you for watching Front Page, and we will see you next time.